The muted thump of the bass vibrated through the floorboards and up into the uncomfortable springs of the pull-out couch. To him, Jessica's shrill laughter, punctuated by the clinking of glasses, grated on my nerves. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and called out, "Jessica, honey, could you keep it down a bit? Some of us have to work in the morning." My daughter appeared in the doorway, her face flushed, a drink sloshing precariously in her hand. "Mom, we already told you Marcus' friends are using your bedroom for the after-party. You can sleep out here for one night. It's not that big of a deal." I felt a prickle of annoyance. "It is a big deal, Jessica. It's my bedroom. Seriously, Mom, relax." "It's just one night," she said, rolling her eyes. "Besides, where else are they supposed to go?" Before I could answer, Julian, Jessica's fiancé, sauntered into the living room, his arm draped possessively round her waist. He flashed me a condescending smile. "Evening, Loretta. Lively little gathering, isn't it?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I pressed my lips together, fighting back the urge to tell him exactly what I thought of his lively little gathering. "It's late," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "People need to sleep." Julian chuckled, a sound that scraped against my already frayed nerves. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it, Loretta. We'll be quiet eventually." He winked, and I felt a flush of anger creep up my neck. Jessica giggled, oblivious to the tension crackling between us. "He's just kidding, Mom," she said dismissively. "Go back to sleep." She turned and disappeared back into the throng, leaving me fuming on the lumpy couch. The music swelled again, drowning out my protests. I lay back down, staring up at the popcorn ceiling, the bass throbbing in time with the pulsing anger in my temples. Sleep was impossible. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. My own children, treating me like an inconvenience in my own home. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the noise and the sting of their casual disrespect. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but it wasn't the kind that brought rest. It was the bone-deep weariness of constantly being overlooked, undervalued. I thought about how hard I had worked to provide for them, especially after their father passed away. I had scrimped and saved, taken on extra shifts, all to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. And this was how they repaid me, by turning my bedroom into a party room and relegating me to the couch. A hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't right. It wasn't fair. As the first sliver of dawn peeked through the curtains, the music finally died down. The sounds of drunken laughter gradually faded, replaced by the low murmur of conversation. I heard the front door open and close a few times as people stumbled out into the early morning light. Finally, silence. I cautiously got up from the couch, my back stiff and aching. The living room was a disaster. Empty cups and plates littered every surface. Sticky spills stained the carpet, and a faint smell of stale alcohol hung in the air. I walked down the hallway towards my bedroom, dreading what I might find. The door was ajar, and I pushed it open hesitantly. The room was in disarray, clothes strewn across the floor, empty bottles on the nightstand, and a faint lingering smell of cigarette smoke. My bed, usually so neatly made, was a rumpled mess. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in, a strange calmness settling over me. The anger hadn't dissipated, but it had transformed into something else, a quiet resolve. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street below. The city was slowly waking up, the first rays of sunlight glinting off the windows of the buildings across the street. I thought about this building, our building, the one I had struggled so hard to keep, the one they took for granted. A new idea, a seed of a plan, began to take root in my mind, a plan that would change everything. They think they can treat me like this, I whispered to myself, a flicker of steel in my voice. They have no idea what's coming. I turned away from the window, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. It was time to start playing a different game, and I knew exactly how to win. The stale air of my own apartment felt heavy, suffocating. Jessica's careless words, "Just sleep on the couch, Mom. It's not a big deal," echoed in the quiet. It wasn't just the couch. It was the casual dismissal, the unspoken assumption that my comfort, my space, was secondary. My needs were an afterthought to Jessica, to her fiancé Julian, and even to my son, Marcus. I sat on the edge of the uncomfortable sofa, the springs digging into my back, a stark contrast to the softness of my own bed, now occupied by Julian's boisterous friends. "It'll just be for tonight," Jessica had said, her tone implying I should be grateful they even bothered to tell me. "They're Julian's closest friends," she'd added, as if that explained everything. I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples. The throbbing headache was a familiar companion these days, working double shifts at the diner, barely making ends meet, and then coming home to this. "Is there even any leftover lasagna?" I'd asked earlier, hoping for at least a small comfort. Marcus had shrugged, not even bothering to look up from his phone. Probably not. Julian and his friends were starving. He'd said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most natural thing in the world for my food, my meager resources, to be consumed without a second thought. I sighed, pulling myself up from the couch. The apartment, usually my haven, felt foreign, hostile. Every chipped teacup on the shelf, every worn photograph on the mantelpiece, whispered tales of a life built on love and sacrifice, a life that now seemed invisible, undervalued. "When your father was alive," I muttered to the empty room, tracing my fingers over a framed picture of us, "things were different. We'd worked hard, saved every penny, dreamed of a future where our children wouldn't have to struggle the way we did. Now, here I was, struggling harder than ever, a ghost in my own home." I walked over to the window, the city lights twinkling like a million fallen stars. Down below, Mrs. Rodriguez was tending to her small patch of flowers, a splash of vibrant color against the gray concrete. She'd mentioned the building was being sold. A pang of worry itched on her weathered face. "I'm afraid the new landlord will raise the rent," she'd confided, her voice laced with fear. I shared her anxiety. Where would we go if the rent went up? I could barely afford it now. The thought of being forced out, of losing the only home my children had ever known, sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a building. It was a repository of memories, a testament to the life I'd built with my late husband. The worn floorboards creaked beneath my feet, each groan a familiar song of resilience, of perseverance. I wouldn't let them take this away from me, not now, not ever. I opened the small, worn box I kept hidden under my bed, the one holding all our important documents. My fingers traced over the faded title deed to our old family car, long since sold to pay for unexpected medical bills. Beneath it lay a small stack of savings bonds, a meager nest egg I'd been desperately clinging to. It wouldn't be enough for a down payment on a new place, not in this city. But looking at those bonds, a flicker of an idea, a seed of defiance, began to sprout in my mind. I spent the rest of the night poring over the few financial statements I had, calculating, recalculating. The numbers were daunting, the odds stacked against me, but the alternative being at the mercy of some unknown landlord, being forced to leave the only home I'd ever known, was unacceptable. The small seed of defiance had taken root, growing into a quiet, determined resolve. I wouldn't just survive, I would thrive. I would find a way to turn this around. The faintest hint of a smile touched my lips as a plan began to form, a plan born of necessity, fueled by a quiet, burning anger, and whispered promises of a future I would build myself, a future where I wouldn't have to sleep on the couch, a future where my voice would be heard. The kitchen table, usually a place of shared meals, now felt like a battlefield. I pushed a plate of half-eaten pasta aside, the remnants of a dinner Jessica and her fiancé, Julian, barely touched. "Honestly, Mom, this place is ancient," Jessica had said, wrinkling her nose. "I can't believe you haven't tried to move somewhere nicer." Julian, ever the charmer, just nodded in agreement. "It's a bit cozy," he offered with a strained smile. Their words stung, echoing the casual dismissal I'd felt since they'd practically taken over my bedroom, forcing me to sleep on the lumpy living room sofa. Now, with the building up for sale, their disdain was even more pointed. They'd already started discussing how much better things would be once some real developer bought the place. I picked up a pen and started scribbling on a napkin, the numbers blurring in front of my tired eyes. 300,000, I muttered, tapping the pen against my teeth. "That's what Mr. Henderson wants for the building." It was an astronomical sum, far beyond my current means. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Jessica strolled back into the kitchen, phone glued to her ear. "Yeah, Chloe, it's a total dump," she was saying. "I told Mom she should move, but you know her, sentimental about this old place." She paused, listening to her friend on the other end. "Exactly, Julian and I deserve so much better. Imagine the penthouse we could get if this place sold to, like, a real estate mogul." She laughed, a high-pitched, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. I crumpled the napkin, my heart pounding a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. The casual cruelty of their words, the effortless way they dismissed my home, my life. It was more than just hurtful. It was a wake-up call. I looked around the kitchen, at the worn linoleum, the chipped paint, the faded curtains. They saw a dump, a place to escape. I saw potential. I saw a future. I unfolded the napkin again, smoothing out the creases. 300,000, I whispered, the number no longer sounding insurmountable. It sounded like a challenge. I began listing the building's assets, meticulously noting each unit, the current rental income, the potential for renovations. My hand moved quickly across the page, driven by a newfound energy. A quiet resolve that surprised even me. Jessica, still engrossed in her phone call, glanced at me with a flicker of annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice laced with impatience. "Are you seriously still dwelling on this place? It's sold. Get over it." I looked up at her, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. "Just making some calculations, dear," I said calmly. "Household budget, you know." I worked late into the night. The kitchen table my command center. I pulled out old tax documents, bank statements, anything that could help me piece together a feasible plan. The numbers swirled in my head, a complex equation that slowly started to resolve itself. It wouldn't be easy. It would require sacrifices, long hours, and a level of financial maneuvering I'd never attempted before. But the thought of their shocked faces, the realization that they had underestimated me, fueled my determination. I envisioned a renovated building, gleaming with fresh paint and modern amenities. I saw happy tenants, a thriving community, a place where I could finally feel a sense of belonging, a place that was truly mine. And as I worked, a plan began to take shape, a secret strategy to turn their dismissal into my triumph. The seed of an idea, planted by their own careless words, began to grow, taking root in the fertile ground of my quiet resolve. It was a long shot, a gamble, but the potential reward, the sweet taste of revenge, was worth the risk. I folded the napkin carefully, tucking it into my pocket. It wasn't just a list of numbers anymore. It was a blueprint for my future. And there's the faintest hint of a smile touched my lips. They thought they knew me. They had no idea. Rain lashed against the bus window, mirroring the damp chill that had settled deep in my bones. Months had passed since I'd been relegated to the couch, since Jessica had told me I was cramping her style. Every creak of the old bus, every cough from a fellow passenger, felt like a reminder of my precarious situation. I clutched my worn handbag, its contents brochures on real estate loans, inspection checklists, property management guides, my only solace. Next stop, City Hall, the driver announced, his voice a bored drone. I pulled the cord, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. City Hall was a labyrinth of echoing corridors and indifferent faces. "I'd like to inquire about small business loans," I told the clerk, my voice barely above a whisper. She pointed me towards a stack of forms, her expression unchanging. "Fill these out and come back when you're ready," she said, her gaze already shifting to the next person in line. The weight of it all threatened to crush me. Was I foolish to even try? Could I, a woman living on borrowed time and a shoestring budget, really pull this off? I spent the next few weeks navigating a sea of paperwork. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of library visits, phone calls, and meetings with skeptical bank managers. "Your credit score is concerning," one loan officer had said, his tone dripping with condescension. "And your income, frankly, Mrs. Miller, I don't see how this is feasible." His words stung, but they also fueled a quiet resolve within me. I would prove them wrong. I had to, for myself. Evenings were spent poring over building inspection reports. The old building, our building, was riddled with problems: faulty wiring, leaky pipes, a crumbling foundation. It's a money pit. Jessica had scoffed when I'd mentioned my interest in it. Why would anyone want that dump? Her words echoed in my mind, but I saw something different. I saw potential. I saw home. A real home, not just a place to be tolerated. I began attending property management seminars, learning the ins and outs of tenant relations, lease agreements, and building maintenance. It's a steep learning curve, the instructor warned, but with dedication, anyone can succeed. His words were a lifeline. I clung to them, repeating them like a mantra as I navigated the complex world of real estate. The library became my sanctuary. I devoured books on negotiation tactics, financial planning, and construction management. Knowledge is power, I murmured to myself, highlighting key passages in a thick volume on property law. The librarian, a kind woman with a warm smile, often brought me a cup of tea, her silent encouragement a balm to my weary spirit. "You seem to be tackling quite a project," she remarked one afternoon. I managed a weak smile. "It's important," I replied, my voice filled with a conviction I hadn't realized I possessed. Little by little, piece by piece, my plan began to take shape. I refinanced some old jewelry, sold a few family heirlooms, and scrimped and saved every penny I could. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, fueled my determination. I wouldn't let them see me fail. I wouldn't let them win. One crisp autumn evening, I found myself standing outside the building, watching the leaves swirl in the wind. The for sale sign still hung there, a taunting reminder of my audacious goal. I took a deep breath and walked inside, the familiar scent of dust and decay filling my nostrils. The landlord, a gruff man with a perpetually sour expression, greeted me with a curt nod. Still interested, he grunted, his eyes scanning me dismissively. "More than ever," I replied, my voice steady and clear. We spent the next few hours haggling over the price, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to grudging respect. He underestimated me, just like everyone else. But I was prepared. I knew the building's value, I knew its flaws, and I knew what I was willing to pay. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached an agreement. As I signed the contract, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds. I stepped out into the night, the weight of the past few months lifting from my shoulders. The building was mine. The journey had been arduous, filled with doubt and setbacks. But I had persevered. I had transformed my low point, my humiliation, into a quiet strength. I glanced back at the building, its darkened windows concealing the secrets within. Soon, those windows would be ablaze with light. Soon, this dilapidated structure would be a thriving community. And Jessica, Julian, and Marcus, they had no idea what was coming. The fluorescent lights of the small credit union downtown hummed a quiet, almost apologetic tune. I smoothed down my skirt, the fabric a little too thin for the chill October air, and took a deep breath. "I'm here to see Patricia," I told the young man behind the counter. He offered a polite smile. "Of course, Mrs. Alvarez. She's expecting you." He gestured towards a closed door with a small, frosted glass window. My heart knocked against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the forced calm I was projecting. This meeting, it was everything. Patricia greeted me with a warm smile, her hand clasped firm, and reassuring. "Loretta, so good to see you. Have a seat." She gestured to a chair across from her desk, already piled high with folders and paperwork. "How are the kids?" she asked, settling into her own chair. "They're well," I replied, the word catching in my throat. How could I tell her that my own daughter, Jessica, and her fiancé, Julian, had essentially banished me to the couch in my own home? That they treated me more like an inconvenient houseguest than a mother, it still stung. The casual disregard, the way they assumed I wouldn't mind giving up my space, my comfort. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. "I brought all the documents you requested," I said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the desk to her. Patricia opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. "Excellent," she murmured, her fingers flipping through the pages. "Everything seems to be in order." She looked up at me, her expression serious. "Loretta, I've reviewed your application thoroughly, and I'm impressed. You've clearly put a lot of thought and effort into this. It's important to me," I managed to say, my voice a little shaky. "This wasn't just about the building. Not really. It was about reclaiming something for myself, about proving that I wasn't just the forgotten mother, the one who could be pushed aside. I believe in this project, and I believe in you," Patricia said, her words bolstering my resolve. "This building has potential, and you have the vision to see it through." She leaned back in her chair. "So," she said, a small smile playing on her lips, "let's talk numbers." The necks are passed in a blur of figures and projections. We discussed loan terms, interest rates, repayment schedules, the nuts and bolts of making my dream a reality. I answered her questions with careful precision, drawing on the weeks of research and preparation I had poured into this venture. I had spent countless nights poring over financial statements, analyzing market trends, and crafting a business plan that was both ambitious and realistic. I knew this building inside and out, its strengths and weaknesses, its potential for growth, and more importantly, I knew what it could become. "I'm confident that I can turn this building around," I told Patricia, my voice gaining strength with each word. "It needs some work, of course, but the location is excellent, and the bones are good." I could already picture it in my mind. Freshly painted walls, renovated apartments, a thriving community of tenants, a place where people felt safe and welcome, a place I could be proud to call my own. "I know this is a significant investment," Patricia said, her gaze steady, "but I truly believe you have what it takes to make this a success." She paused, her hand hovering over a stack of papers. "So," she said finally, a hint of anticipation in her voice, "are you ready to sign?" I took another deep breath, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the pen. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. The moment I took control of my future. The moment I stopped being a victim and started being the architect of my own destiny. "Yes," I said, my voice firm and clear, "I'm ready." As I signed my name on the dotted line, a wave of emotion washed over me. Relief, excitement, and a quiet sense of triumph. I hadn't just secured a loan. I had secured my freedom. Patricia beamed. "Congratulations, Loretta," she said, extending her hand. "I have no doubt you're going to do great things." We shook hands, the formality of the transaction giving way to a shared sense of accomplishment. As I left the credit union, stepping back out into the crisp autumn air, I couldn't help but smile. The hum of the city seemed different now, somehow brighter, more hopeful. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose and anticipation. I had a plan, and now I had the means to execute it. Jessica and Julian, with their casual disregard and thoughtless comments, had unwittingly given me the push I needed. They thought they were putting me in my place. They had no idea what I had in store. The game, as they say, was afoot. The mahogany desk gleamed under the lawyer's lamp, a stark contrast to the worn, dog-eared document spread between us. Just one more signature. Mrs. Diaz, Mr. Henderson said, sliding the final page toward me. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the pen. This was it. This was the culmination of months of hard work, of scrimping and saving, of late nights poring over spreadsheets and early mornings meeting with contractors. This was the moment I took back control. "Are you all right, Mrs. Diaz?" Mr. Henderson's voice held a note of concern. "You seem a little pale." I managed a smile. "Just a little overwhelmed, is all." "It's a big step," he smiled back, clearly understanding. "Indeed, owning 8 rental units is a significant undertaking. Congratulations." He gestured towards the document again. "Whenever you're ready." I took a deep breath, the scent of old leather and fresh ink filling my nostrils. With a decisive stroke, I signed my name, Loretta Diaz, on the dotted line. The building was mine, the very building where my own daughter, Jessica, and her fiancé, Julian, had treated me with such casual disregard. The building where I had been relegated to the couch while they entertained their friends in my own bedroom. The building I was almost evicted from. Now, it was all mine. "Excellent," Mr. Henderson beamed, gathering the documents. "Everything is officially finalized. You'll receive copies of everything next week." He extended his hand across the desk. "I must say, Mrs. Diaz, you've handled this entire process with remarkable efficiency. Most first-time property owners find it quite daunting." I shook his hand, my own grip firm. "It's amazing what a little motivation can do," I replied, my voice calm and even. He chuckled. "Indeed. Well, if you need anything further, don't hesitate to contact me." As I left the lawyer's office and stepped out onto the bustling city street, the weight of my secret settled upon me. It was a heavy burden, but also a strangely exhilarating one. No one knew, not Jessica, not Julian, not even my son, Marcus. They still thought I was struggling, still saw me as the inconvenience, the burden. Let them think that. Let them continue in their blissful ignorance. My plan was far from over. This was just the beginning. I walked several blocks, lost in thought, replaying the scene in the lawyer's office. The smooth stroke of the pen, the rustle of the papers, the satisfied smile on Mr. Henderson's face. It all felt surreal. I stopped at a small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee drawing me in. I ordered a latte and sat at a table by the window, watching the people pass by. They were all going about their lives, oblivious to the quiet revolution brewing within me. I took a sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through me. It was time to start the next phase of my plan. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Hi, Maria," I said when a voice answered. "It's Loretta. I have some good news. I closed on the building today. Maria, the building manager of the property I now owned, gasped. "Really? That's fantastic. Loretta, congratulations. So, what are your plans?" "I have a few ideas," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I want to start with some renovations. New plumbing, updated electrical, maybe even a fresh coat of paint in the hallways." "That sounds wonderful," Maria said enthusiastically. "The tenants will be thrilled. This building could really use some TLC." "Exactly," I replied. "I want to create a real community here, a place where people feel safe and comfortable, a place where I could finally feel at home again." I thought to myself, a sentiment I didn't share with Maria. "I'll be sending you the contractor's information tomorrow. We can discuss the details further then." We chatted for a few more minutes, finalizing a time to meet and discuss the renovation plans in person. As I hung up the phone, a sense of purpose washed over me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding, about creating something positive out of a difficult situation. It was about proving to myself, and perhaps eventually to my children, that I was more than just an afterthought. I finished my coffee, the last drop bittersweet, the bitterness of the past, the sweetness of what was to come. I stood up, ready to face the world, a new landlord with a secret plan. The building was mine, and that was just the beginning. The real transformation was yet to come. The transformation of not just bricks and mortar, but of lives, including my own, and maybe, just maybe, the lives of Jessica and Julian. They just didn't know it yet. Rain lashed against the windows of Riverside Towers, a sound I was becoming intimately familiar with. Over these past few months, I'd traded the quiet hum of my old sewing machine for the constant drip of leaky faucets and the creak of aging pipes. Being the new landlord of this place was a lot more hands-on than I'd anticipated. "Mrs. Alvarez," a young voice called from the doorway of my office, which used to be the building superintendent's storage closet. "The washing machine on the third floor is overflowing again," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Thank you, Miguel. I'll be right up." Truth be told, I was still getting used to being called Mrs. Alvarez, owner and proprietor of Riverside Towers. The first few weeks were a blur of paperwork, late-night calls to plumbers, and endless trips to the hardware store. "You sure about this, Mom?" Jessica had asked, her tone skeptical, when she saw me wrestling with a toolbox one afternoon. "This isn't exactly your forte," Julian had added, a smirk playing on his lips. "I'm learning," I'd replied curtly, turning back to the faulty wiring in the hallway light. I hadn't told them, of course, the real extent of my learning. They thought I was simply trying to make the best of a bad situation, fixing up a rundown apartment to make it livable. They had no idea I owned the whole building. The tenants, however, were a different story. They'd seen the slow but steady improvements, the fresh coat of paint in the lobby, the new security cameras, the repaired intercom system. They'd seen me, sleeves rolled up, working alongside the contractors, making sure everything was done right. "Mrs. Rodriguez," who lived on the first floor, brought me a plate of her famous empanadas one afternoon. The building's looking so much better, Mrs. Alvarez, she'd said, her eyes sparkling. It's good to have someone who cares. That, more than anything, fueled my resolve. I wasn't just fixing up a building, I was building a community. I'd started small, focusing on the most urgent repairs. The leaky roof, the broken elevator, the flickering lights in the hallways. Then I tackled the cosmetic issues, repainting the drab walls, replacing the worn-out carpets, and planting flowers in the neglected courtyard. Looks like you're taking this landlord thing seriously, Marcus commented one evening, glancing out the window at the newly planted rose bushes. I simply smiled, a quiet satisfaction bubbling inside me. He still thought I was just trying to make our apartment nicer. He had no idea. The biggest challenge, however, wasn't the building itself. It was managing the tenants. There were late rent payments, noise complaints, and the occasional personality clash. I learned to be firm but fair, mediating disputes, setting clear expectations, and holding everyone accountable. This isn't a hotel, I'd told Mr. Henderson from Furby after his third noise complaint in a week. People live here. They need their rest. He'd grumbled but ultimately complied, the late-night karaoke sessions becoming a thing of the past. Slowly but surely, Riverside Towers was transforming. The hallways were brighter, the courtyard was alive with color, and a sense of community was beginning to bloom. I'd even organized a small tenant appreciation picnic in the courtyard, complete with hot dogs, lemonade, and a bouncy castle for the kids. Seeing the smiles on their faces, the laughter echoing through the courtyard, filled me with a sense of pride I hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't just a building, it was a home, and I was its keeper. One evening, while reviewing the latest financial reports in my makeshift office, I heard a knock at the door. It was Jessica. "Mom," she began hesitantly, "Julian and I were wondering, do you think we could maybe move into the penthouse apartment, now that it's renovated?" I looked up from the spreadsheets, a small smile playing on my lips. The penthouse, with its panoramic city views and newly installed jacuzzi, was the crown jewel of Riverside Towers. I'd spent weeks overseeing its renovation, painstakingly choosing every detail, from the Italian marble countertops to the custom-made oak cabinets. "We could pay rent, of course," Jessica added quickly, sensing my hesitation. "Whatever you think is fair." I closed the folder, my gaze meeting hers. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I was thinking of keeping the penthouse for myself." Jessica's jaw dropped slightly. But you live in this apartment," she stammered, gesturing around the small, sparsely furnished office. I leaned back in my chair, a sense of quiet triumph washing over me. "This," I said, tapping the folder on my desk, "is my office. I own this building." Jessica, the look on her face, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and just a hint of fear, was priceless. The rain outside had stopped, and a sliver of moonlight peeked through the clouds, illuminating the skyline. The city lights twinkled below, a silent testament to the new chapter in my life. And it had only just begun. The faded, peeling paint of Riverside Towers mocked me every time I drove past. It was a constant reminder of the night I slept on that lumpy couch, Jessica and Julian's laughter echoing from my own bedroom. But now, 3 years later, a small smile played on my lips as I pulled into the newly paved parking lot. The building, now a vibrant terracotta with gleaming white trim, stood tall and proud. "It's beautiful, Mom," a voice beside me said. I glanced at my grandson, David, strapped securely in his car seat. "It is, isn't it?" I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Your mommy helped pick the colors." I unbuckled David and lifted him out, his small hand gripping mine tightly. We walked through the grand entrance, the cool marble a stark contrast to the sticky linoleum floors of the past. The lobby, once dimly lit and smelling of stale cigarettes, now boasted a sparkling chandelier and the scent of fresh lilies. "Look, Nana," David exclaimed, pointing to the colorful mural on the far wall, depicting a vibrant river scene with playful otters. "That's new," I said, chuckling. Every corner of Riverside Towers held a story of transformation. The renovations hadn't just been cosmetic. I'd replaced the leaky pipes, installed new windows, and updated electrical systems in every unit. It had been a monumental undertaking, but watching families move into clean, safe apartments filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. "Mrs. Peterson," a voice called out. I turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired teacher who'd lived in the building for over 20 years. "These flower boxes are just lovely," she said, gesturing to the vibrant blooms spilling over the window ledges. "They brighten up the whole place." "Thank you," I replied. We all worked hard on those. Creating a sense of community had been just as important to me as the physical renovations. We had a monthly potluck in the newly furnished community room, a book club that met in the library I'd helped create, and even a small playground for the children. "Swing, Nana," David tugged on my hand, pulling me towards the laughter echoing from the playground. I watched him scramble onto a swing, his face lit up with pure joy. This was what I'd wanted all along, a safe, happy place for families to thrive. Later that evening, I sat in my own apartment, a spacious 3-bedroom on the top floor with a breathtaking view of the city. It was a far cry from the cramped, run-down unit I'd occupied before. Sipping a cup of tea, I looked through old photographs, my fingers tracing the faded images of my children. Jessica's graduation, Marcus's soccer trophy, birthday parties crammed into our tiny living room. I'd sacrificed so much for them, and for a while, I'd felt like it had all been for nothing. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Jessica, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. "These are for you," she said, a hesitant smile on her face. "They remind me of the ones we used to grow in the old garden." I invited her in, my heart pounding in my chest. We sat in the living room, the silence stretching between us. "Mom," she began, her voice soft, "I want to apologize. For everything, for how I treated you, for taking you for granted." I reached out and took her hand. "I know, sweetheart," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I know. I see what you've done with this place," she continued, glancing around the apartment. "It's amazing. You've created something truly special." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached my eyes. "I did it for all of us," I said, my gaze meeting hers. "For our family." She looked at me, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Julian and I were talking," she started, trailing off. I waited patiently, a sense of anticipation building inside me. "We've been looking for a bigger place," she finally said. "Now that we're expecting," she placed a hand on her stomach, a shy smile spreading across her face. "We were wondering if there might be a unit available here." My heart swelled with a mix of emotions, love, pride, and a touch of sweet vindication. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, my voice filled with warmth. "Of course there is." I stood up, pulling her into a hug. "Welcome home," I whispered, the words filled with a meaning that went far beyond the walls of Riverside Towers. It was a new beginning, a fresh start, and a testament to the power of resilience, hard work, and a mother's unwavering love. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Jessica, radiant in her graduation gown, sat at the table, Julian beaming beside her. My son, Marcus, slouched in his chair, picking at the remnants of his breakfast. "So, Mom," Jessica began, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension, "have you found a new place yet? The new owner wants everyone out by the end of the month. You know." Julian chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that grated on my nerves. "Tough break, Loretta," he added, a smirk playing on his lips. "Maybe you could try that shelter downtown." I took a deep breath, a calmness settling over me that surprised even myself. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I'm not going anywhere." Jessica's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up in surprise. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone laced with suspicion. I replied, meeting her gaze directly, "that I own this building." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus's jaw dropped, his fork clattering to his plate. Julian's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. Jessica, however, recovered quickly. "Oh, very funny, Mom," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "You're hilarious." "I assure you, Jessica," I said calmly, producing the deed from my bag and sliding it across the table. "I'm not joking." Jessica snatched the document, her eyes scanning the legal jargon. Her face paled as the reality of the situation sunk in. Julian, leaning over her shoulder, let out a strangled gasp. Marcus, finally finding his voice, stammered, You own the whole building." I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. "Every brick, every pipe, every single rental unit," I confirmed. "And that includes this apartment." The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted dramatically. The air of superiority that Jessica and Julian usually exuded evaporated, replaced by a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Jessica's eyes darted between me and the deed, her mind clearly racing. "But how?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been saving and investing for years," I explained, watching their reactions with a quiet satisfaction. "While you were busy spending your allowance on frivolous things, I was building a future for myself. And while you were treating me like an inconvenience in my own home, I was working towards something bigger, something better." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I saw an opportunity when this building went up for sale, an opportunity to not only secure my own future, but to create a thriving community for everyone who lives here. Julian cleared his throat. His face flushed. "So, what does this mean?" he asked, his voice strained. "It means," I replied, looking directly at him, "that I'm your landlord. And it also means that I'll be implementing some changes around here." I gestured around the apartment, my gaze lingering on the worn furniture and peeling wallpaper. "This place needs a lot of work. New plumbing, new wiring, new everything." And I added, my eyes twinkling, "I think it's time to update the tenant roster as well." Jessica's face crumpled. "You're going to evict us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not necessarily," I said, my voice softening slightly, "but I will expect the rent to be paid on time, and I will expect a certain level of respect from all my tenants." Respect, I emphasized, that I haven't received lately. I stood up, gathering my things. "Congratulations on your graduation, Jessica," I said, my voice sincere. "I'm proud of you. But this," I gestured to the deed, "this is my graduation. This is the beginning of my new chapter." I walked to the door, pausing on the threshold. "Oh, and one more thing," I added, turning back to face them. "The new rent rates will be significantly higher. Consider it a small price to pay for the valuable lesson you've learned today." And with that, I left them to stew in their newfound reality, a quiet smile playing on my lips. The building wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was a testament to my resilience, my hard work, and my sweet, well-earned revenge.